Hello and welcome to this episode of the Energy Connects podcast. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Anne-Sophie Corbeau, global research scholar at the Center on Energy Policy at Columbia University. As you would expect, with Anne-Sophie, any conversation with her is always exciting and enlightening. This was recorded at Gastech 2024 in Houston before the US election results were announced. Among the many things that we discussed during this podcast were an overview of the global LNG industry, why low carbon energy supply is so critical, the impact of Europe's recent regulations on methane emissions, and why hydrogen is the Swiss knife of the energy industry. Have a listen.
Thank you so much, Anne-Sophie, for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. To start off, as you have the bird's eye view of the global LNG industry, what do you think the industry, where do you think the industry is at currently? And what does it need to do in terms of cleaning up its entire value chain?
Well, right now what we can observe is that there is a lot of LNG which is currently under construction, in particular in this country. I mean, there is about 320 billion cubic meters of LNG export capacity under construction, and 1/3 is located in the US. However, what I'm hearing it as Gastech, and we heard that during the first day, but also in other conversations, is that people are not very happy about the so-called US LNG export pause. People want to be able to export more. And I have seen some quite bullish statement about, how much US LNG could be exported in the future. Much more than what you would expect based on just, the existing capacity and the capacity under construction. However, what we also have is more and more conversations about low carbon LNG. I think it's now obvious that we need to do something about methane emissions. The EU methane regulation have just came in force in Europe, and they are going to be very important for whoever wants to export whether LNG or pipeline gas to Europe. And this regulation is going to impact mostly new contracts, but they are also going to have some implications for the existing contracts. People have to do their best efforts in terms of the emissions which are associated with the LNG. I don't think we are in full agreement about what that means exactly, because there is still a lot of specifications which has to come from this regulation. But what I observe is that in the new LNG plants which are under construction, there is usually an effort to reduce the emissions which are associated with the LNG liquefaction plant. So, for example, you have some facilities which are using clean electricity, either coming from hydro or from renewable, or you try to associate CCS, for example, in order to reduce emissions, or maybe using electric engines, again powered by renewable or clean electricity. So this is a very important change, in my opinion.
That's an excellent point. And does that sort of question mark and that uncertainty also spill over into, let's say, areas such as hydrogen, where there's a lot to celebrate, but there's a lot of work to be done as well?
There is definitely a lot of work to be done. What I'm not happy about is all the hype which was created around hydrogen a few years ago. I started my career on hydrogen 25 years ago. I was a young engineer. I was trying to put a fuel cell reforming system in a car. Believe me, when I'm looking back at that, it's wow. What was I doing? But we have been told, hydrogen is a solution to everything, is a Swiss knife of the energy industry. I think hydrogen is very complicated. It's a very complicated molecule to transport. It's expensive to produce if you want to produce it in a clean way. And what we have observed both in Europe and also in the US is that it's taking a long time for the regulation to be put in place. 3 years in Europe to define renewable hydrogen, 3-4 years to have the hydrogen and decarbonized gas package, which is very important for the infrastructure, which is absolutely crucial if you want to link the production to the demand. And here in the United States, people are waiting for the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know there are some bets on whether this is going to be before the end of the year, but I think most people agree probably after the presidential election, so that we know whether this is a Republican or Democrat administration. But people want some clarity. And I think this is an important thing, tell me what the regulatory system is going to be, and then I can work with that. What I found also very interesting, because, very naively I thought, okay, the people who really want to develop renewable hydrogen, they want to have some certainty about 45V. What I got from some comments was, well, actually, the people who are using natural gas, but are planning to have very clean natural gas with very low methane emissions, are also interested in 45V. Are not planning to use 45Q, which I thought was more going to be the case, so that you're not waiting too much for the rules to be finalized. On hydrogen, and this is the case everybody, there is a need for offtake agreements. And the offtake agreements, well, they depend on whether you have the demand. And I have been discussing demand for hydrogen on my panel on Tuesday. I have been discussing ammonia demand on my panel on Wednesday, and it's the same kind of concern. Where is the demand? What do we need exactly to incentivize that demand? Do we need to have some quotas? Do we need to have some alliances? But what I found is that people are more and more looking at low carbon ammonia made from natural gas, to the extent the methane emissions are kept very low, because they just say, well, this is where we are seeing the projects making progress, very simply. And the report from the Hydrogen Council, which was released on the morning of Tuesday, is kind of saying the same thing. And there are a lot of projects also in the United States, well, in North America in general, which are also based on low carbon hydrogen. So this is very interesting. There is some sort of, change of mind. I don't know to what extent this is really going to influence European mindset, because I think the people, well, some people are very much renewable hydrogen. But I think behind the doors, if you are really scratching the surface, they are starting to look at low carbon hydrogen. I know that there is a definition which is in preparation in Europe. Now, this is not going to make everybody happy, exactly as we have seen in US. And honestly, I was very surprised. This very tense discussion between, the people on items like additionality, the temporal matching. It's crazy for me, because, I thought we, the Europeans, are, the absolute masters in terms of the regulation. And then you find out, oh, well, actually in the US, this is exactly the same.
That's a very interesting point. And we had Ivana in the studio earlier in the morning discussing that hydrogen, the Insights report, and about the framework as well. So I think, yes, of course, there's a huge need for a sort of more clarity on that framework and how it looks like. At Gastech here in Houston, what else are you hearing? And you've been sitting on the panels, moderating them. So what are your thoughts?
So I have moderated 4 panels so far. One was on US LNG supply, the second was on low carbon LNG, then on hydrogen demand, and also on fast-tracking ammonia. So I think I have already touched upon some of these points. What I find is that really the atmosphere is really very optimistic about the growth of LNG. I am not sure we have completely answered the question about where the demand is going to come from. And as I keep repeating to my friends, I think in Europe we have had our LNG revolution. I don't think there is going to be a lot of upside in terms of demand. There will be some hiccups, and certainly probably next year we are going to have higher imports because of lower exports from Russian pipeline gas through Ukraine, and probably also colder weather. But fundamentally, it's going down. So the question mark is Asia. And the question mark, because I was hearing at the beginning of Gastech, okay, we need to displace coal, and this is very important, but there is a question of the competitiveness. Because the reason why gas displaced coal in the US is that it was very cheap, economic 101. Why did it displace coal in Europe? Because of the Large Combustion Plant Directive and also CO2 price. You don't really have that so much in Asia. And you are looking at what China is doing. I mean, definitely the role of natural gas in the power sector in China is very, very small. But this is also where people disagree the most. And I think China is a very important component of, the future LNG demand, but so are the multiple Southeast Asian countries. And you basically need to understand each of them to be able to have some sort of picture of what is going to be the demand in the long term. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is all these delays which have been announced. I had this big pillar of 320 billion cubic meters. So I think Arctic LNG 2 is definitely a challenge. we are very pleased to know that in this country. There have been some delays announced also on some LNG plants like Golden Pass. We don't know what is going to happen to Mozambique LNG, which is stopped. So it seems that the amount of LNG which is going to come to the market is maybe lower than what we were initially expecting. And there is a question of timing as well. What I'm just concerned about is, okay, so if actually the LNG is coming a little bit slowly, is it going to maintain prices at a relatively high level? And therefore, we are not incentivizing demand. Because now, the core of the demand, the core of the future demand for gas, for LNG, is going to be in Asia. And I know some people are telling me, okay, they are price sensitive, but the level of prices that they are ready to accept is a bit higher. Okay, I'm happy to believe that. But if you are telling them this is going to be $10, $12, $13 per MMBTU, as we are seeing now, I think this is still quite expensive. So we need to find this very soft point between what the countries which are really the future of LNG demand are ready to accept and what is also good for the producer, taking into account that we need to deliver low carbon LNG to everybody.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating to hear that, because here at Gastech we get to hear so many strands of view from all over the global LNG and gas industry.
Indeed, absolutely.
Anne-Sophie, it's been such a pleasure having you in our studio, and thank you for your time to come down and talk to us.
Thank you for the invitation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to follow us on social media and get the latest coverage at energyconnects.com. I will be back with more podcast episodes at Energy Connects. Until then, goodbye.